the Ad Hoc Capital Debt Committee to order on Wednesday, June 26, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, please.
Director Photo? Director Sullivan?
Here.
Director Cummings?
Present.
Alderman GOV?
Here.
Alderman Clee is here. Alderman Clement?
Here.
Alderman O'Brien? Alderman Wilshire?
Here.
And Mayor Donches. You have 1, 2, 6 in attendance.
And we do have a quorum, thank you.
And I see Alderman O'Brien coming online.
Oh, Alderman O'Brien is on Zoom.
Alderman O'Brien, can you hear us?
He's muted. Yeah.
Yes, I can. I'm at home due to medical reasons. I am by myself, and I can hear you guys quite well.
Perfect, thank you for that. Okay, discussion. I am going to recognize Director Cummings.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. And before we begin, I just want to note that I do have what I handed out to you on my computer. If you want to share screen, that way Alderman O'Brien can.
Okay, you're on the right desk, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But it dawns on me now, without a Zoom link, I don't know how he's going to see.
He's on.
Oh, yes, you can.
He sees it.
He can.
Not right now, not right now, so.
Alderman O'Brien, can you see?
Without a Zoom link, I'm not sure he can share screen.
Yeah, it's just.
So right now, all I can see how handsome Director Cummings looks. That's it.
Oh, then you can't see it all.
Oh, okay, just share.
That's good.
Distorted
They
streets.
can do it in there.
She said that ever since I
But
grew a beard.
can't they?
Yeah,
do it?
pretty much.
They just gotta show it on TV, no?
I know.
Give me a second, Director.
Sure.
Well, if it's too much of an issue, Madam President, I could catch up tomorrow.
No, you're fine. We just didn't know if you could see the spreadsheet or not.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're absolutely fine.
Director Cummings, can you send it to him in an email?
I can. I forward it to him in an email. Yeah. Well,
Alderman O'Brien, can you see your email?
Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah.
He sent it to you in an email?
I'm actually going to open Zoom right now
Okay.
and see if I can get this to go. What's the
She's sleeping back there. Oh, why not?
9573.
I'm sorry, 9573.
Yep.
Yeah.
9070.
9070. Let's see if I can join.
Passcode is, nobody leaves a voice.
I don't answer it unless if I don't recognize the number, I don't
Yeah.
answer it. And they've got to leave a message.
Madam Chair, we also have in attendance
I got it. Yeah.
Ms. Dawn Enright. I said that right.
Present, yes.
And Director Hannum is also in the audience, as well as John Griffin. Sorry.
All right. I believe.
Yeah, I have it.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mike.
All right, now, Madam President, I believe that Alderman O'Brien can see this at home, and what it is showing is what I handed out just a few moments ago to you all, and I have extra copies that will be for the minutes. I have been working on this over the last few days, and what this is an updated version of the document that you saw last week, and it, I believe, comports to what we were asked to do, which was to try to bring down the bonding, ideally every year to that, under that 30 million target threshold as outlined, or at the very least try to get it to, around 125 million over the 5 years, which I was able to figure out a way to get it to around that 125 million over 5 years. Let me tell you a little bit about the changes that have occurred from the last iteration to this one. So, and my goal this evening is to hopefully wrap up this conversation so we can continue to move along. We will revisit this document annually, hopefully in the spring of every year. But my goal is to really get this first sheet agreed to. This first sheet is really the debt service bonding plan more than anything else. So we have some sort of guidance for city administration as to what we would like to see for projects to be pursued over the next few years based off of what we know to date. And so some of the major changes from last week to this week, I met with the various directors who may be affected by some of the changes. We did that on Monday. CFO Griffin and I talked about how we might be able to tweak this plan, and a couple of the recommendations that came out of that meeting were, one, hydro. You'll note that hydro is only showing at 6 million as opposed to 7 million in the previous iteration. Looking to borrow 6 million now, but we'll take that 1 million and spend cash for that design, and that would be under the capital projects, which is a different sheet that you have before you. That is broken down over 2 years at $500,000 each year, but it's based off of what we think we can accomplish, so it's a realistic target. Additionally, we took out some of the operational costs that we were discussing moving into the operational budgets, trying not to pay interest on some of these items, trying not to have them be part of our debt service plan. So schools, deferred capital maintenance, and the paving program have been moved out of this, and we believe we should be paying cash for them, and I've layered them into the capital budget as appropriately can be accommodated. And it's understood that we will do some forecasting over the next few years, understanding that this is an expense that we need to take on. So we would be looking to accommodate these expenditures. At this time in the capital budget, at least for the schools, there's probably still an open conversation of whether the paving program is treated within the capital budget or eventually moves into the DPW operational budget. But you'll note that on another sheet as well. And then lastly, looking to move out the senior center renovations. That was really a placeholder figure at about $2 million. We're gonna need to do something. I don't think we're gonna need to do anything in the next 5 years per se. So I think if we were to move that out, that would be a reasonable accommodation to be made right now. We can obviously change that as time goes on if need be. But then also it gets to the other point, which is we should start to program in some of these larger capital projects in outer years, so we can have a sense as to how much we may need years 6 through year 10. And we can do that another evening, but I think that is a wise conversation that we should be having as we further develop our capital planning. And so with those various changes that were made, we can really feel comfortable of having about 125 million projected to be authorized, and that is well under the 150 or so that we originally targeted or bogeyed for. So if something was to come up over the years in an emergency type basis, or if some of these numbers prove to be inaccurate and we need a little bit more spending, or if another project gets moved in to one of these items, we have some capacity to accommodate. Madam President and others who are here this evening, my goal this evening is to get consensus on this first sheet, because hopefully if there's consensus here, and my goal is to ask for a motion for me to submit a communication to the full Board of Aldermen recommending this plan, and then we can continue this conversation for the other sheets behind behind this one, that's back up. I will stop my comments there before we go on to the next sheets, but I wanted to provide just a very quick high-level overview.
Thank you. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam President. Director Cummings, thank you for doing this. I just want to recap what I was trying to write notes and so on while you were discussing this. So you're saying that the operational budget for the paving program, which we had 4 million, sorry, God, 4 million for 3 years at a cost of 12 million. You're saying that we're going to eliminate this from and basically fund it in a different manner?
Correct.
And the same for the capital expenditure spending for the school projects?
Correct.
The same thing with that 9. And then if I look, you reduce the hydro by 1 million, and you push the senior center out.
Correct.
That's,
Those are the major changes
okay.
to this first sheet here that you're looking at.
And I think I have a carryover thought loss from last night because I had a second question and now it's gone, so it will come back.
Alderman Dowd.
I just have a question. You said you're moving the 4 million a year paving out of this plan and paid for other ways. Where are we coming up with $4.5 million every year?
So if we're good with this, we can move on to the next sheet, and I can kind of talk through that, and we obviously can come back to this
Yeah.
first sheet, because I do think that they go together. So if you were to go to the capital projects sheet, which would be this one here, that you're also seeing on the screen. So what this is supposed to be representing is what would be the capital budget that would be in the operational budget as a rough guideline that we'd be looking to work toward. We're not gonna get there right away. It's gonna take some time to get there, and through a conversation that I had with CFO Griffin and earlier today, we talked about a strategy that might work where, and I noted it at the bottom of the sheet, it's actually one of the newer additions. We would look at during the surplus process at the end of the year, particularly for this year, but then we can talk about doing it as a strategy over the next couple years to use surplus for capital projects, and when we're closing out the fiscal year, look to transfer surplus funds into various capital projects. I will let CFO Griffin talk about the mechanical nature of how that actually works, but that's essentially, in essence, what we would be recommending, because we don't want to overburden the capital budget by having it increase in this conversation, you're going from almost $1 million to $10 million in 5 years. I would never recommend you do that. And so what you could do is start to, over the 5-year period, gradually increase the capital improvement budget that we have to get to a reasonable target number, whatever that target number is, and we need to talk about that target number. Maybe it's 6 million, maybe it's 9 million, and maybe it's 10 million. But we can work towards that over a 3 to 5 year horizon. And then we can also talk about how much of that, and for this conversation, I'm gonna say 5 million to keep it simple. How much of that new 5 million should be spent in certain ways? For schools, for instance, or for paving, for instance, or for fire facilities deferred capital maintenance, or general government facility capital maintenance that we need to plan on a percentage. So again, keeping it simple, if it's $5 million and we agree that 20% should be set aside for schools deferred capital maintenance, you know that there's approximately $1 million available that the schools can work toward year-over-year programming with the various miscellaneous deferred capital projects. And we have some comfort and policy guidance relative to the budget number. I'll note that would be, double what they would be getting this year. And it would be a good way to try to work towards having a program in place that is predictable, and also gets to a dollar amount where you can actually do some of these deferred capital projects with cash and not necessarily bonding and paying interest on some of these smaller ticket items. A previous policy guidance that was given by CFO Griffin and myself is to look to pay cash for any project that would be under about 1.5 million. So we're really looking at, some of these projects that aren't really rising to the level of debt. There are also maybe projects that we want to get going and we want to use cash for to study or start to the design of. And so what you have before you is actually a more developed list than what you've previously seen. This has been cross-referenced with the departments. This has been cross-referenced with the capital improvement plan. This has also been cross-referenced with the transportation projects and larger scale infrastructure projects that we have been talking about on the horizon, and trying to make sure we have a plan in place to accommodate what would be our contractual obligation match. And so we know that we may have these various obligations, and so I've highlighted some of those in green. What's highlighted in blue is what's more timely or what has been suggested need to be done sooner rather than later. And it takes into consideration some of the other projects that we moved, or services that we moved from the first page to this cash and capital expenditure page.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a few questions. If you don't mind, I'm gonna start with one of them, which is the paving program. So if it's not, if FY '25 and FY '26 are not in the bonding and they're not in the cash, are we not doing paving the next 2 years? Is that the plan?
So it's my understanding is we have a bond already authorized to 27.
Oh, okay.
So we have that planned up until 27. We really need to have a plan come 27, and that's what this tries to do.
Okay.
Now, but this is where we're going to need to start talking about strategy and making sure we have a good policy plan in place where we're in agreement. That, for this conversation, is scheduled at $4 million. Now,
Yeah.
that $4 million, if we were to just layer that in 27 without any pre-planning in the DPW operational budget, that would be very difficult to do, both from meeting a guideline perspective and then setting a tax rate perspective. So there may be a question about how we layer that in and take advantage of the next couple of years, and maybe we set aside either during surplus at the end of this year a certain dollar amount, or in FY '26 we set aside a certain dollar amount, and then we gradually grow to $4 million. But we need to kind of have that conversation. Right now, I wanted to just visually display it at starting in 27, because I know that that's what our contractual need is going to be. But I would encourage us to continue a conversation where we look to layer in some of these bigger dollar amounts.
Okay.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. My second question is, we passed the FY '25 budget last night. So when I'm looking at the cash proposals that you have on here for FY '25, it's 4.275 million. Are some of these things already incorporated into the budget, or are you anticipating using surplus? Where, can you go through the list?
Absolutely. To answer your question, though, we would need to use surplus. These weren't necessarily contemplated per se in the operating budget.
All of them?
But I can double check that. I will double check that. So because some of them may have been in there and I just missed it.
Yes.
One third question. The $100,000 for voting machines.
Mm-hmm.
The state passed a law that's giving towns and cities 50% match, I think, to buy voting machines. Is that after the 50% match, or is that not contemplated there?
Director Cummings.
Thank you, yes. So two really good questions. First, I want to get to the first question asked. I think it would be fair to say that there might be a little overlap in the FY '25, and so we would need to kind of, I want to vet that out. At the end of the day, this needs to be read in a way that this would be additive to the operational budget. We would be doing it during the surplus period, a surplusing period in the early to mid-fall time period. And all these expenditures do not contemplate any type of alternative revenue sources at this time, but ideally come next spring, as we have more confidence on some various projects, or we see a grant opportunity that we may see, we would be telling you that, and we would then be recalibrating, whether it's in this worksheet or in the debt service worksheet, to take in consideration some of these alternative financing plans or resources of funds, so we can update these financing plans.
Last question. 4.275 million is the total. What do we anticipate, or what can you project as, and I know I'm not gonna hold anybody to it, but what can we project would be our surplus this year?
It's way too early for us to answer right now. I think we'd be able to have a better conversation later on the summer, early fall on that standpoint, but my goal would be is to always present something to you that I thought was achievable. I think achievable of the $4 or $5 million range right now. I don't think, the $11-10 million range is gonna be achievable.
Well, I asked the question because typically speaking, we allocate somewhere around $4.5 million back to the tax rate.
Yes.
So were you, with those figures in mind that we're looking at, were you also including that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, well, the first thing I was gonna ask was, if you're spending cash in '25, it's from '24 surplus, which I know we don't know yet. But the other thing is, have we looked at the overall current bonding plan, seeing how the payments and debt service dwindles over time? Especially if we're gonna start talking about the out years from 7 to, from 6 to 10, because if you look at the bonding plan, you're getting near zero by 30-something.
Yeah, if you'd like me to respond,
Yes, please.
Madam President, John Griffin, CFO. This has been a great committee, and it's enabled me to explain the realities of the finances of the city. Great questions. So if you remember, the first chart that I put up was, on the left-hand side, as Alderman Dowd indicates, current debt service that dwindles. The problem is, it has 5 more columns of $30 million a year. So it's not like the old days where you heard, oh, we're paying off the high schools and we're gonna have a lot of money. Those days, as Alderman Siegel used to say, that ship has sailed. So, that piece of paper gives you a $30 million plan, 5 years, 150, as Services Director Cummings did. He read what you wanted, he brought in a 125. What I'm saying to you folks is the strategy of changing the oil and then building a new building, you probably don't want to do that. I remember several years ago when the mayor came back, the city of Cambridge in Massachusetts, which literally prints money, had a $700 million operating budget and $85 million capital budget. We have a $340 million general fund operating budget and $1 million. You really don't want to do that, right? So there's going to be some pain to get to where you want to be. But what I always tell you is the $30 million a year is going to bring debt service, not down, it's going to bring debt service from $20 million to $30 million. I ran the numbers with our financial advisors at $40 million. In 5 years, it was going to go from $20 million to $37. So if you want to have more projects that you actually need, you need to kind of share the wealth. So you don't want to be bonding $40 million projects. and you've got nothing for the burdening capital budget program. So what I'm asking you to do is take that 7 million that you're kind of saving on the debt service, and that's an annual number, so you use it to pay cash for things. We've learned a lot, I've learned a lot here. We used to basically pass the budget, start paying the people in this new budget, scrambling to get surplus. Thinking about escrows, which was a strategy to kind of, for lack of a better term, not really go up against the cap, because the budget was already passed the previous year. So what Director Cummings was saying, we met today, close the books, don't dream of escrows, which basically creates more accounting. Move forward the capital projects that people are working on. Take inventory in September and say, how are we gonna pay for these things, right? My first year here, we didn't have enough revenue surplus to actually pay down as Alderman Clemens said, the amount against the tax rate. So they used a combination of appropriations not spent and revenues. Now what's happening, we have a lot more revenue than appropriations not spent, but if we can close the books, put all the surplus in to grow the unassigned and have a good, healthy assigned, that's where you're gonna get the money to pay this stuff. So, just one final point, and it's interesting because I'm gonna be testifying tomorrow in the court on the spending cap calculation, but I shared this with the mayor and other key figures, Alderman Dowd, I believe, as well, but we're gonna be, when you start appropriating these numbers, you're gonna need to do a debt exclusion. Now, the complaint at the court is, we want you to redo the calculation, and you have to cut the budget that you just passed by 22 million. Now, obviously, you have the pressure relief valve of using a debt exclusion and a capital exclusion. So I don't think anybody would be interested in cutting the budget that you worked hard on by 22 million. But we'll do the best we can, but over time, you catch up, because the more things you put in, grants, capital projects, capital supplemental appropriations, it's all caught up to us. We have a $460 million number and a $456 million spent. So, but we'll see what happens tomorrow, but I'm hoping we're able to prevail, but you're close to using debt exclusions, and the strategy that we've used, you're probably gonna need one to pay for the things you need to pay for, which is on these sheets of paper. The old, when I first got here, it was the cap, we were under the cap, obviously. Very rarely had debt exclusions, but the percentage increases were tiny. They were like 1%. Inflation was 0 in 1 year. Now you're living in inflation 3. You've got the index we use is 5.4, down from 5.8. You're in you get collective bargaining agreements, it's hard to get to that 2% increase every year, which is inflation. I'm just suggesting that this is a key component of embedding, as Tim says, Director Cummings. You gotta start somewhere, otherwise, you can't move $9 million in 1 year, and then, which is gonna be almost 5% on the tax rate. So, long-winded approach, but I'm trying to explain that we've already analyzed the dropping of the debt service, and we're adding into it. And that's the reason for that chart, and that goes from 20 to 30 million in the next 5 years. Thank you.
All set?
Yeah, I'll get one.
Okay, one more?
We're talking about expending cash from the FY '24 surplus, whatever money's left over. Typically, the mayor and probably Mr. Griffin and others get together and come with a list to the Board of Aldermen. I mean, I think this committee is great, and it's doing a lot of advanced planning, should probably do done years ago. But I think before that list is presented to the full Board of Aldermen, it ought to come to this committee. Because you're making plans to spending cash, but unless we're all on the same page, it won't play together. So I think that discussion probably in the draft form ought to come here first.
Mr.
If I
Griffin?
may, one comment on that, and we due to the pandemic, we had what was called significant amount of operating escrows. You never knew if you had to go to that fifth conference and seminar. You never knew. Everybody kind of doubled up because they weren't spending money. The list that you're familiar with is called an escrow list, unlike appropriations. Not recommending that because there's such a need to fix things that if you don't fix them, it's gonna cause more problems down the road. The same people that want those unlike escrows because they wanna maximize the use of their budgets are the same ones that want all these dollars.
Right.
So they need to join in, not come up with a list of unlike escrows. What I'm suggesting here, these are all gonna be supplemental appropriations, but you're gonna know what they are. 2 years or 3 years ago, we asked for $9-something million worth of escrows, some of which we're gonna do capital projects, but one I remember clearly, we asked for $3 million of escrows to fund the surf schedule. And there was some motions to cut that, and it's like, okay, well, you're not gonna be able to buy any equipment then, so. We've learned a lot. I think getting the surplus, both revenue and appropriations not spent, will fund a lot of this stuff, provide a reasonable tax rate, and build going forward. So 25 is gonna be using, as Director Cummings said, it's gonna be using surplus. Assigned fund balance, essentially, what's gonna happen. And then the next years, you bake into the budget these things. And I think when your citizens and people ask, it'll be like, okay, so you had a strategy not to go from 20 million to 37 million in debt service. But then they see things being done, and all of these great engineers and all, they're gonna say, yeah, we didn't have to build a new building because we took care of the one we have. And that's not unique to Nashua, that's unique to every city and town in the country, but that's what my request is. I've talked to Director Cummings and the mayor, and that would be the way I'd go, especially if we don't know the results of the court case. Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of the comments that were just made. I think it helps understand the strategy. And I know it's controversial, but it shows the failings of the spending cap, truly, because it does not tie into the tax rate at all. I mean, it does, but not really, because if you're talking about spending, for example, if we get grant money, or we get an unanticipated revenue, and we've already spent that amount of money, even though that has no impact on the tax rate whatsoever, we can't spend it because we have this arbitrary rule that says you can't spend that money because you've already spent X, Y, Z. And it's foolish. And so I'm contemplating whether or not, especially with this plan in mind, whether or not that makes sense anymore. And maybe, for me, I would get rid of it altogether. But if that's not gonna be the appetite of the citizens, maybe a tax cap is something that's better. At least it makes sense.
Mhm.
Because you can exclude things like unanticipated revenue because it doesn't matter, it doesn't impact the tax rate. So I don't know, maybe, I know we just voted on a charter amendment last night, but maybe it's time for us to look at that, especially considering the fact that we do want to start using more cash to pay for these things. And I don't think that there's a person in the city who would argue that these projects aren't important. These are all things that are maintenance, basically. They're here to, and keep up what we have. So, I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on that. Going back to the original draft plan, I want to say thank you to Director Cummings and to everybody who worked on this. It's clearly, you put a lot of thought into it, came back to us with essentially what we asked for, and an alternative to figure out how to pay for those things. I'm comfortable with it. It gets us underneath that 150 million total, which is really where we wanted to be ultimately. It's a bottom line. Puts us 24 million under that, which I think gives us a lot of capacity to do a lot of other things. It gives us the capacity to do some of these things on the cash side because you're not paying the debt service on that. So you could increase what we pay in cash, because that, instead of going to the debt service, it would directly go to those projects. The other thing is too, though, you're saving taxpayers money as well by not doing everything all at once. And the third benefit of it is for an emergency, because ultimately something could happen where we do need to have a bond, and although we could go and certainly put together a plan that goes all the way up to the 150 million and then say, well now we can't do that because we have to do this, that's not good planning. The better planning is to reduce that and say, no, we're gonna build in a buffer. Hopefully we don't have to use it, but if we do, it's there. So I think this is a good plan. I'm comfortable with moving forward with it, and so I will support it.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what my colleague said. This is a good plan. I mean, it cuts it down to 125, leaves us with a little bit of wiggle room in case the unpredicted happens. I'll let the 950,000 slide. It's fine. But all in all, I think this would be a solid plan to go off of, and allows for some more room. Buying with cash is great. The more we could do it, I think the better off the city will be. So I have no problem supporting this plan.
Alderman Clay.
Thank you. I'm echoing my colleagues' words. And I do want to add to something that Alderman Clemens had said about the spending cap versus a tax cap. When the courts had overturned this and said it was unconstitutional and we removed it, it allowed us to do spending without having to do bonding. And the bonding, for those that are listening, the bonding creates more debt, just like you have your mortgage. You have all that extra interest that we could be using to actually better the city. So tax cap would have been much better. We tried to argue that. I was up in Concord at the time, as was Alderman O'Brien. We tried arguing it because it only affected Nashua. And that was we had 400 state reps voted on it. That's something that affected only Nashua. They would have been better off to not do that and try to compel Nashua, those group of people, to do a tax cap, which would have been easier, I think, because we're not truly limiting the tax that we can do, and it doesn't leave us any emergency wiggle room. I think this is a great compromise. I was not here at the last meeting, so I did listen to the conversation about trying to stay within, at that time it was the 30,000 per year in it, and I think that's admirable, but I think we need to look at that. We've already stated that we would do certain projects within the fiscal year 25. So I think we need to stay with where we are. And I do like this. And I also heard, so I kept hearing, I think it was Alderman Dowd who kept talking about phasing in the garages rather than putting 15 grand in the first year. I personally would feel more comfortable doing it the way we're doing it, putting it all in the first year. My fear is that something else could come up because, Madam President, Madam Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, we're putting this as a advisory to the Board of Aldermen. It's not a holding everybody's feet to the fire for the next 5 years,
Correct.
which is something technically we couldn't do because you can't hold the next legislative body to something to that. But, so this is just a strong recommendation, correct? Which is again why I'd like to see things happen as this new amended has been done. I fear that if we try to push things out too much so that we stay within a certain per year, something's gonna fall to the wayside. And I'm grateful that Alderman Gouveia is willing to forgive the $11,500.
No.
Thank you.
Alderman Gouveia.
I do have a quick question, if you don't mind. On the DPW garage, we have that for 40 million. It tabled at the full Board of Aldermen is the reauthorization to do the plans. That's not factored into that 40, right?
That's correct. That is
And how much, do you know how much those plans are gonna cost? Is that a full 2 million of that authorization, which sounds rather high, but,
And I'm gonna tell you it's gonna be more.
okay.
So I would say, rough numbers, you can, design costs would be somewhere between 6 and 10% of total project cost. So, you know, would it be unreasonable to see between 3 and 5 million spent on design? That wouldn't be unreasonable at all.
Gotcha, thank you.
Anything else? I think this was a very good meeting. Director Cummings.
Thank you. If I could just close out with a couple comments. One, I look at this as a living document where the administration should be coming back before you regularly, and this is dynamic, and so we want it to be changing. I want everyone to expect it to be changing. But with that being said, the goal that I'm trying to achieve here is to get a rough understanding of predictability of the plan, of what the values and priorities of this community are based on this plan, so I can help the other departments. As an example, and I'm gonna use the fire department as right now. They are gonna have some needs in the upcoming years. One of them is looking at the airport station. And if we know roughly right now what we think we might have available for capacity, it's an easier conversation for us to start planning on a couple $100,000 of design, which we can use cash for in the next year or two, to help us then inform what our debt service plan will be. And as we start to move this effort forward, or this initiative forward, that is the exercise and the goal that I would be looking to work towards. So I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm for this and working with me on this, and I'm committed to continuing to move this effort forward. This is by no means the end of a conversation.
Alderman Cummings.
Thank you. I'm gonna move that the committee adopt or recommend the draft proposal as presented this evening. And we'll have to do that by,
Authorize Director Cummings to,
and authorize Director Cummings to create a resolution that we can all co-sponsor, I guess, before the Board of Aldermen.
thank you.
So that's my motion.
Okay, Alderman Clee.
I'm absolutely for that motion, but I did want to ask, if I may,
Yes.
Director Cummings a question of something that he just stated when he gave an example of the fire for like the airport. That is not in any of these documents, correct? The Amherst Street, the Amherst Street fire, though, did I not see that?
Right. It is.
That one
That
is here,
that is
it's
a-
under the eligible capital expenditure projects. But the airport one isn't, as we would think about. That's correct, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And, Madam President, I just wanted to, thank everybody for having worked on this, and I'm sorry that I missed the last meeting, so.
Alderman Dow.
Yeah, I think the resolution ought to state that this is going to be revisited every year, and that if a crisis comes up, the Board of Aldermen can modify this because of that crisis, whatever it might be. Hopefully none, but, so I think the resolution has to have a little flexibility in it, because things change over time, and The other thing I wanted to say is the ones that we're doing on cash, I'm just looking at the numbers, all round numbers, and I think they're high. If we get a proposal on them, I think they're gonna be less. And I think there are ways to get some of those done for less money, by specifications in the RFP. So I think that's a critical piece of this. And the more, and we also talked about having money set aside somewhere to do the initial plans. I don't know where that's coming from, but that's a good idea, because then when we actually have bond, we know exactly what we're bonding for.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor
We
say
have
aye.
to do a roll call.
Because-
Oh, right, sorry.
Okay,
Clerk, please call the roll.
yes. Let me find my page here. Director Sullivan?
Yes.
Director Cummings?
Yes.
Alderman Govea?
Yes.
Alderman Clee says yes. Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Yes,
You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 yeas.
and that motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for your work.
Thank
and
you.
Ladies, whoever else has been working on this, I really appreciate everything you've done. I think we've come up with a good plan.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you all for that. Okay. All of the comments, do you have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn.
Call the roll.
We have to do it by roll call. Director Sullivan?
Yes.
Director Cummings?
Yes.
Alderman Govea?
Yes.
Alderman Clee says yes. Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien?
Why not?
Alderman Wiltshire?
Yes.
And you have 7 yeas to that, and Alderman Clemmons, I just want to be able to write the motion after, so that I have it for Donna.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, we are adjourned at 7:17 PM. Thank you very much, everyone.